unfortunate death of a young chartered accountant at one of the big four accounting firms.
Mental health is a serious problem. It is a challenge we need to relook. When you bring in kids from tier 2, tier 3 cities, their hunger is just very high. Employment is a challenge. I think we are hiring for jobs. We need to start hiring for skills. We allow people to work from home.
Please don't give us wrong ideas. The unfortunate death of a young female employee of EY, an accounting and consultancy firm, has put the spotlight on work pressures. Her mother has blamed stress from back-breaking workload. Like EY, one of the other big four companies is Deloitte. We have with us today the CEO of Deloitte South Asia, Romal Shetty, to tell us what kind of pressures the new generation of employees face. An avowed Indophile, Shetty will also talk about India's economic prospects and the reshaping world order. With the US elections around the corner, we will ask Shetty how the results there will impact India. Romal, welcome to PTI's show at 4 Parliament Street. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So we'll start with the money talk first. I have a question to you about the economy, the global economy. I just want to get your perspective on where we are headed, where India is headed, especially given that there's economic turmoil all over the world. China is uncertain, Europe is on the downtrend, UK is especially bad, US is still in a transitioning mode. So where do you see us?
Yeah, so first, I think globally you're right. So across the world, clearly it has slowed down. It has slowed down, and it has slowed down in Asia Pacific, not just China, but even if you look at Korea, if you look at Australia, there is a slowdown that has happened on that side. Clearly Europe, and I think Europe has been struggling for some time. If you see the key indices, for example, those numbers are coming down, and now UK is obviously in a bit of a slump. But if you look at Germany, because Germany is a real powerhouse manufacturing, a lot of manufacturing is not there in a lot of Europe. But if you look at Germany now, they're also in a bit of a challenge. The geopolitical situation combined with what's happening in Ukraine, the Middle East, and others, that's leading to a lot more challenges as well. So in all of that, so there is a positive side. My view is that whenever it becomes difficult in the Western world, in some sense, India tends to benefit. There's actually more work. So whenever there's actually a recession that has happened, if you look at history, India has actually got more work, more in the services side. I wouldn't still say that the manufacturing side, we have cornered things. We are picking up on a few things. So my view, and our view in Deloitte as well, is probably will still be there at about 7%. We'll be able to achieve it. I know the first quarters I've not been there, but probably 7% seems to be. FY26 probably it will come down, maybe 6.7. Now there are some parts of it which are good, because the oil dropping is in some sense good, because we obviously import a lot of things. The Fed rate cut, obviously that has happened, that also tends to the weakening of the dollar. But China and US going down also means exports will be under severe pressure. So they will not import that much, and to that extent it will also impact us. So you've got the headwinds, the tailwinds. It's, if you ask me, it is impossible to predict, right? I can only say and pray that what I'm saying is the right thing. But the fact is that still, considering all of this, still India is in a better position in spite of whatever is happening. And we see that, whether electronics now slowly, I think that is improving. Semiconductors, that is improving. Semiconductors will be important to see 3-4 years later, because while we may not getting the top grade, but we are investing a lot, and semiconductors will be involved everywhere, in every part. So overall, still a better place, but we can't say we are decoupled from the world. So we'll still continue to grow, and when everybody else is not growing, it will also impact us.
I wanted to ask you about the US elections coming up in a few weeks. What impact will it have on the global economy, especially if Trump comes to power? One version is that it'll actually improve the US economy, and if Kamala Harris comes, maybe it may not. And how will that again impact India?
So I guess normally, I think from an economy perspective, Trump, it's not that Trump has been bad for the economy. I think he's done well for the economy. The concern that the world would have is that would there be a lot of trade barriers put across? So America to that extent has been largely free, but if he starts putting a lot of trade barriers, and also like last time he did, which is to say, can we get American money back into the country? That means you start investing here and not investing elsewhere. Those will have implications on all countries as well. So I think other than that, I don't see fundamentally between Kamala Harris or Trump for India. They may be specific for other countries, clearly. For India, it may not be significantly different, right? Because we are a part of the Quad and everything else. But trade barriers, yes, and bringing a lot more manufacturing back is something that he will definitely try.
The unfortunate death of a young chartered accountant at one of the big four accounting firms has brought into focus the work pressure. Her mother has alleged work stress and backbreaking workload. The government has also stepped in, saying that they will look into the working environment at the firm. The chief of the firm, where the young woman had worked, said that he will not rest till achieving a harmonious workplace environment. As a head of one of the four top accounting firms, your thoughts on this? Do you feel there's a need to shield young employees from situations from physical and mental health deterioration?
Yeah. So I think very unfortunate, very tragic, a young child losing her life. There is always a need. We are in the client service business. And in the client service business, there will always be deadlines. There will be always things that it's not that if you have to carry a news, you have to carry a news. You can't say that I'll carry it maybe 12 hours later, right? So, but having all of that, having all of those pressures, and also what has also changed is today our workforce has changed. Our workforce is from tier 2, tier 3 cities, not necessarily having a lot of family support where they work. Different kind of in the past we probably only had MBAs and chartered accountants. Now we have engineers, we have doctors, we have lawyers, we have different professionals as well coming in from all strata of society. So we should always keep relooking at, and mental health is a serious problem. It is a challenge, and I'll give you a simple example, right? Even so, somebody's come from a tier 3 city working in Delhi. Her parents are saying that you need to get married. She wants to work for a few years, but she is under tremendous pressure every time somebody is a gay. Parents are not accepting it, that you could be different. So it's not just the pressures of the work; it's the pressures of various things in your this thing. And I always say this. I think the younger generation is far smarter than I ever was. They're far more intelligent, far more smarter. Sometimes I think a little bit more resilience will be useful also, right? So considering all of these factors, and sometimes it's not, these organizations have been built over 100 years, 150 years. Organizations are not that, you should be this, this bullying culture and all of that. That's not normally the way professional organizations are. But are there individuals who do certain things? Yes, absolutely. And very importantly, when individuals do it, so first, I think as an organization, you need to have an open culture that nobody should be scared to sort of address those or bring up those issues. And second, as an organization, when there is bad behavior, you need to take very strict action and very swift action, and ensure that people are known. I say this even in our organization where we fired somebody at a very, very senior level just because of the kind of conversation. He wasn't harassing in a physical way, but he was harassing in a mental way, right? And we ensured that he was removed, and it was ensured that people also know of that so that they don't do things. So this will happen. We need to your point, we always need to relook. So for example, in our case, we've instituted a panel of post this is of course just now, of 3 very eminent people, right, independent people, right? Tarun Bajaj, who used to be the revenue secretary, Manoj Kohli used to be the CEO for Airtel in India, and of course Subodh Jaiswal, who used to be the former CBI director, to relook at all our people practices, our policies, processes, how our ethics cases are. We have an ethics helpline. How do they get actually managed? What are our mechanisms in place to do it? And I'll give you just a simple thing that I do personally. I do something called Mics Not Muted. So I go to every part of the country, every office, and people can ask any and every question in an open forum, right? And the questions don't stop. So people ask, of course, it's a little bit of a fun thing as well, but people do ask serious questions as well. And the concept is, if you can ask your CEO any question, including, embarrass him a little bit as well, then it just makes everybody else saying that you can actually walk up to a senior person and say, I don't enjoy this. So work pressures will be there, but I guess we need to relook but the organizations don't. We do a lot of things. The organizations don't necessarily, and in fact, you'll be happy to hear. I mean, when I came into when I was when I took on this responsibility, so I actually divided. I brought a concept called a Chief Happiness Officer, and I have a Chief People and Experience Officer, and I took and I have a Partner Matters to specifically look how can I improve the talent experience of all my people, because we have about 30,000 people in the country, 35,000 people serving the Indian markets, 90,000 people serving global markets. So we have a large workforce. The Chief Happiness Officer looking at three things really, to say that looking at mental health and physical health specifically, looking at diversity, not just diversity of gender, but also neurodiversity. So we actually have people physically able as well as neurodiversity. And third is, in the client service business, it is tough. You do work hard. You are amongst the elite. You sort of, but can we also have a little bit of fun? Can we also have an environment which is, it's how you put the culture across to ensure that people are comfortable with what they do, because you spend 14 hours sometimes in the same place. If you hate where you're coming, and also the flexibility that we are one of the few firms that is still continuing with work from home.
Circling back to economy, there are various projections that have put for India to achieving the $5 trillion mark. We are currently fifth largest economy. Third largest is what is being targeted. So what, according to Deloitte and you, is the achievable target for India? And what are the headwinds that we might face in achieving that target?
So, I mean, if we grow 6.7, 6.8%, I think we will be there at 5 trillion. Right? But for 7 trillion, I think we will need to go a little bit more, 7.2, 7.3. So I don't see that as of course, at a base that we are doing. But the world economy has to also improve. It cannot be that you can grow in isolation first. I think that is one part of it. Second is also the fact that what as India are we going to do in a few areas? Let's take agriculture. Our agriculture productivity is not even actually is not comparable to most. We are far below the benchmarks. So how much of tech? Because one thing that India has done well is the adoption of tech. Right? In certain areas, we've been able to scale. So in agriculture, can you really use tech to improve productivity at least 3 times over? And that is possible. It's not that it is not possible. There are some measures being taken, for example. In manufacturing, because in a country of our size and scale, we are obviously good at services, I mentioned that, but if manufacturing has to be a key base. So you have to be a food basket for the world in certain areas. You have to be the manufacturing. Electronics is getting there, but still I would say we are far off. So can we identify those niche areas where we think we could sort of in some sense dominate, not necessarily like China. China was 80-90% of a lot of things. And third, very important part, my belief is R&D. We spend less on R&D, and we cannot only be faster, cheaper, better. We have to start innovating.
You mentioned 5 trillion is achievable, but the goal of developed nation by 2047, is that achievable? And what will it actually mean for a country like India if it becomes a developed nation, for the people, for the economy? What will it mean?
Yeah. So one of the things is the important part in the 2047 developed economy was that the per capita income should be at least $20,000, right? We are at $2,500. My own belief is that when the per capita income moves to $5,000, you will see a lot more. You will see buying much more, buying patterns larger. So the shape of the economy, the domestic economy itself will also change. It becomes more self-reliant as well. So that is an important thing at 2047. And to be honest, it's a difficult challenge, but you should never ever take a vision of something that is easy to solve, because it shouldn't be by incremental growth. But the important thing that I feel is that when that per capita income goes beyond certain things, you just see much more faster pace in the economy.
We are back to coalition politics after 10 years. So how do you see this impacting the reform process? What reforms do you see happening during Modi 3.0? What could be casualties, especially the big ones like big privatization or big labor reforms? How do you see that?
Yeah, so I guess in any when you have, for example, a full majority, it's much easier to carry forward things in some sense. But at least whatever we are seeing, I can't claim to be the expert in terms of course, coalition politics. Politics generally I'm not that, so I'd rather not speak about it. But because of working with the government, are we seeing any slowdown in some of the things that they want to do? The answer is no. There is still a push. There is a tremendous push to get things done in all things, right? So, for example, we are also a part of the Capacity and Capability Building Commission, for example. So there is this real focus to say, how do we skill more people? How do we build more capability? So that focus is there. So I don't think any specific, leave aside the political reform, because I can't, political or other reforms, but the economic reforms, I really don't see any major roadblocks in that of Modi 3.0. I think they will continue with that, and they will continue at the same pace.
Including privatization and
including
labor reforms.
privatization. I think they've not specifically mentioned privatization in making that effort, but I think they will do that. And see, but today also look at it, the stock markets are doing so well. All of the PSUs are also doing so well. So why would you want to privatize and lose value as well? But I think in the future, the concept was very clear that government should not be in the business of running businesses.
My question is a little bit on the academic front. Yeah, do you subscribe to the view of Ruchir Sharma that capitalism need to reinvent itself for future growth? And added to this is Indian capitalism moving on the right path to make India a developed nation by 2047?
Yeah. So I think the free market theory, free market capitalism, has always has been something the Western world has done. But I think from an India perspective, if you're not inclusive, right, and to be inclusive, that means that you cannot just allow free market access. There are so many people who don't have basic facilities, right? So that model has to be different for our country, and I think that model has to be different for many countries, right? And so including people, taking people along, I have at least seen, when you bring in kids from tier 2, tier 3 cities, their hunger, their loyalty, in some sense, not that kids here aren't, but it's just very high. It's just very high. So it's also about that. So our capitalism has to have a bench of inclusivity. Today, 50 or 40 or 50, 60% of the country is into farming.
What is your assessment about India's growth and inflation trajectory for current FY and medium term?
I think we are now largely, like I said, we believe that we would be in the 7 to 7.1% range in terms of the growth. I think the inflation is reasonably under control, and also because the rural demand has picked up as well this year. So we are seeing sales in terms of vehicles and others. For example, there is a pickup as well there. So largely seem to be okay in terms of inflation, under control, and growth at about 7%.
Unemployment is a major political issue, we know that, but there's no real official gauge of which could assess the actual magnitude of the problem. In your opinion, how big or small is this for our country, and what are the sectors that need to be targeted?
So I think unemployment is a challenge for the country. I don't think so there's any doubt in that. One is really skilling. I think we are hiring for jobs. We need to start hiring for skills, not for jobs, because there's a fundamental difference, hiring for a degree and hiring for a job rather than hiring for a particular skill. So I think skilling is something that needs to be done, and everything from micro skilling, which means that can I make a Shrikand in 30 minutes, to do a cyber or a quantum
artificial intelligence is also being talked about as a factor that may impact jobs. There are some projections which say that AI could potentially replace about 400 to 800 million jobs by the end of 2030. What is your assessment of AI and its impact, and how do you see the workforce adapting to this change?
So in every industrial revolution that has happened, there has always been this thing that jobs will be lost, right? The answer is that did that actually happen? Yes, the horse cart person did lose the job, but then hopefully some of them knew how to drive and became a driver, right, in a car. AI is also similar, that currently in terms of what your current jobs are, maybe that could be lost, where for example something is repetitive, something is commoditized, those businesses will be lost. But will there be new jobs created, new roles created? 100%.
Since you talked about multiplier effect, I just wanted to understand your view with regard to investment. So far, government has been doing heavy lifting as far as capex is concerned, and this year also rupees, 11.11 lakh crore has been earmarked for capex. Uh, I mean, government have been hoping that private sector will pitch in, but so far they have been laggard as far as investment is concerned. And you being consultant, what sort of signal you are picking up from the private sector? Are they ready for investment? Do you see signs of animal spirit being revived in the private sector?
See, I think there is, because of, probably if you ask me that, 10 years earlier with a similar situation, right, would there be animal spirits, or would there be, absolutely, okay. But today, with various kinds of geopolitical, other things, supply chain issues, resilience, people are sometimes cautious. They are cautious. But my view is, I think everybody was also waiting for the election, because that gives some sense of a uniformity of, what are the next steps, what could be policy interventions and others. So I will not be surprised, and we see a significant interest when we talk, because obviously as Deloitte, we're in 150 countries. We work with different companies to bring them into India. One of the largest FDI comes through, we are a participant to getting in FDI into the country. So if you really see in the first quarter, FDI has actually improved. It was going down a little bit, but FDI is actually not gone down. So you will see a lot more coming in now in manufacturing, in electronics. You will see some big interventions as well. But I agree with you. I think it is the government which has done more. But our profits are, if you look at our top companies, our profits over the last 3, 4, 5 years has actually been quite good. So they need to invest.
GST, goods and services tax, is now in its 8th year of implementation. Businesses are talking about rate rationalization, making it more taxpayer friendly. What more steps can the government take, or the GST Council could take, to make GST more taxpayer friendly, and your views on rate rationalization?
So this is back to this, capitalism question, right, of GST sometimes, of what components would you want to do more. And second is also the state exchequers. Sometimes, the states announce a lot of freebies. Someone has to fund it. So if you ask me, you bring in bring in petrol and diesel into GST, so that will be a good thing as well. Straight away 18% or 28 or whatever, because some of them are 50-60% as well, right, in terms of. So it is not easy, and there is a council that sort of works through. So there's no one person who will not be impacted by anything that we do. But over a period of time, I think it is better. But remember, like I said, people say, just bring it to 18% and I'm happy. But the poor person is also paying 18%. The rich person is also paying 18%. So these are some very difficult challenges to say, how do you sort of manage some of that. In terms of GST, I think there has to be a roadmap in terms of the structure that I think is anyway there to get to that level, but it will take some time. But overall, if you see I have a simple parameter I used to always look at. Indian trucks, freight, really trucks used to be 250 kilometers a day they used to travel pre-GST. Post-GST, right, now we are at 550 kilometers. We're still much lower than the United States, which is 800 kilometers. But it's not because of GST that they're only moving. There is a FASTag, there is other things. But the fact is that every state, every toll, they would be stopped, documents asked, harassed, all right? That has all stopped. Now, it's much more, and in some sense, we're far more advanced when it comes to GST, right, in terms of the technology systems and others to capture than probably a number of countries, right? So
I wanted to bring you back to that point on trade barriers that you talked about. What do you think would be the impact of the outcome of US elections on Indian outsourcing industry? Because we have heard in the past Trump talk about protectionism, be American, buy American has been a plank. And also, how would the election outcome affect the free movement of highly skilled workers?
So, the outsourcing industry, right, can be impacted by two things, really. One is Gen AI, because if you can do a lot of coding, you can do a lot of things using Gen AI, then, the outsourcing can be impacted. But it's not so simple. It's not as easy that you can plug and play and tomorrow, I can start writing all codes and somebody else writing elsewhere. Today, most pieces of code have something to come from India, always, right? Similarly, for example, but the skill and scale, to give you an example, the number of accountants and professionals at, maybe 20 years back in the United States in a classroom, let's assume was 100, today it's probably 25 or 30. So there are not enough people coming out as well. So there is a severe shortage as well. Number of young people are also a shortage. So to say that would completely the outsourcing industry, and we were cheaper earlier, but today, for example, to see the scale and the skill that is available in the kids, it's not easy to replicate. So outsourcing may be difficult, but manufacturing, for example, there may be a lot of incentives given to say, come back there. But it's not. If it was that easy, a lot of it from China would have moved away. China still continues, right? Maybe new investments are taking time to go there, but it still continues, and it's not that lock, stock, and barrel people have moved from China back to the United States. It's not an easy clock to rewind. So I don't think so. Outsourcing industry will be, in fact, my view is services. I think India will continue to dominate, and clearly India will be the services capital of the world. So not be that easy to displace.
You are the youngest Big Four CEO in India. So how are you reshaping Deloitte in India? What are your plans for the company?
So as Deloitte, we've been growing fairly fast. I would say we're the fastest growing professional services firm in the country. We grew last year at about 30%. We breached the 10,000 crore mark in India. This is Deloitte India, remember. So this is just the India business. We have, of course, global business as well. I have stated that we want to be 20,000 crores by 2027, and we want to be 5 billion by 2030 in terms of from a growth perspective. And that's also our own reflection of where India is growing, where India's capabilities are growing, and therefore we believe that how we can serve globally as well. But I've before that, because sometimes only the top line numbers come, but I have said as a philosophy, as a CEO, that when I took over, that I wanted three things that we as an organization are known for. We as an organization are known to be kind-hearted, high-performing, and an innovative organization. That's what we want to be known. My vision for Deloitte is that the biggest innovations in the world, in the Deloitte world, come from India. And to give you also, in the past also, India has always grown. So it's not that India has not been growing. Most firms in India have been growing. But I think what has changed is now we are adding to the quantum absolute amounts also globally. Earlier we were not adding. We were growing whatever, but we were really 0.00% of the global firm. But this year, we contributed to, Deloitte's a 67, 68, I mean the results are out, $67-68 billion company. We contributed 10% of global growth of Deloitte. And we contributed to 70% of Asia Pacific's growth. That is, includes China, includes Australia, includes Japan, right? Includes Korea, things like that.
I wanted to ask you about your views on, big tech. Globally, large companies, technology companies like, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Meta, Google, they have been facing global scrutiny from from policymakers across the world, different countries on their practices, also their position, which is dominant when it comes to digital platforms. Um, my question to you is, how do you see India's regulations? We are in the process of drafting a digital competition bill. There are rules that are coming in place for digital personal data protection, DPDP. How do you see these regulations? And at one point of time, the government was also talking about AI regulations. How do you see all of these affecting the way platforms are operating in India today?
Yeah, so let's take data privacy, right? Data privacy will make it extremely difficult for certain set of data to move outside the country, right? So in some sense, unless it's a sovereign cloud or a sovereign infrastructure, you cannot move. Most of these companies are global companies. So they don't work independently in every country. Their systems are all interconnected. So they'll have to change their business models as well. So to that extent, see, regulation is important. Regulation is important to control, to ensure that there is a fair thing. And business models also have to evolve, because that's the way the things will work. But we need to be careful of regulation stunting innovation, stunting growth, right? So we have to be careful about that. But having said that, like I said, regulatory is very important, because every country has its own sovereignty. It's not that the Western countries don't have their sovereignty, and it's not that they allow their data to come in as well. So we've got to have an equal playing field, but it should also not stunt innovation.
We also started seeing startups push back on this, right, against the big tech and their monopoly in the Indian market. How do you see this, emergence and the rise of startups, fighting and struggling to find their place when it comes to dominance of global tech?
So every time, for example, any startup, because they don't have that kind of resources which the companies have, there'll always be a challenge. But remember that the big tech were also a startup one time. They were also fighting a different kind of environment. That's normal, as long as there is no attempt to suppress them and no attempt to subvert them, and also give the support as well, right? Today India has a big startup ecosystem. To give them the support, I think it is okay.
Do you think AI will take over humanity at some point of time? Because there has been a lot of debate and discussion around that, on whether it will lead to some sort of an existential crisis at some point of time. Sam Altman has talked about it. Even Elon Musk, some of the biggest names in technology have warned us about the fallouts of AI taking over humanity. Which way do you see this debate? Do you see it as something that could be a threat to humanity, or do you see it as something that will aid the humanity in reaching all of those goals, the UNDP goals and so on and so forth, on sustainability, on food?
It is both. It's not only one thing. As optimistic as I am about AI, if not controlled, most science fiction movies come into reality. We've seen that, right? AI is also similar. If not controlled, it is extremely dangerous, right? You have seen the responses, for example, of AI to a child asking some question and getting angry, right? So, like I said, if as humanity you have biases, if you have different kind of emotions, and that translates into various things as well. That does translate into things as well. Even when we say analytics, it translates into that. So it has to be governed. AI has to be regulated. There is no doubt. And like I said, just like everybody has a chief as an AI, evangelist or an officer, you also need to have somebody who's looking at the responsible AI as well in every organization. It is dangerous because it is at scale. So you have to, it's both. It can aid, but it can also be a threat. And as long as it's managed, controlled, not easy. And then, of course, the things like World Economic Forum are doing certain things, trying to bring some standards. So I think the standards are important to be built as well from an AI perspective.
All right, Romal, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.